And welcome to Inside of Tales, where we uncover the pivotal moments that shaped our world. Today we are diving into one of the history's most significant and devastating events, World War II. Have you ever wondered what sparked such a global conflict? What forces and decisions led nations into a war that would forever alter the course of history? Join us as we explore the complex wave of political tensions, economic turmoil, and ideological battles that set the stage for World War II. Get ready for a gripping journey into the past to uncover why World War II happened. When World War I concluded in 1918, the last thing anyone expected was even more devastating conflict just 2 decades later. So why did the world plunge back into war with World War II? So Germany's invasion of Poland in 1939 prompted France and the United Kingdom to declare war, officially started World War II. However, this was merely the tipping point in a series of events. Various economic and political challenges had been simmering for years, building up tension. In this video, we'll delve into the era between World War I and World War II, known as the interwar period, to explore the issues that paved the way for the world's second and far deadlier global conflict. Post-war impact. In 1919, more than 24 nations sent representatives to France to draft peace treaties to end World War I. Notably, the defeated countries, especially Germany, were excluded, causing significant resentment. The victors, led by the United States, France, and the United Kingdom, shaped the peace terms. US President Woodrow Wilson proposed the 14 points advocating the League of Nations to ensure collective security, where an attack on one member would be considered an attack on all. His plan also called for arms reductions, free trade, and self-determination for nations. Conservatively, French Prime Minister Georges Clemenceau wanted to impose severe penalties on Germany. After lengthy negotiations, the Treaty of Versailles was signed. It blamed Germany for the war, took away its colonies and 13% of its European land, restricted its military, and required reparations to the victors. These harsh terms angered many Germans, leading to protest and resentment. Adolf Hitler used this discontent to gain support, arguing the treaty aimed to destroy Germany. The Treaty of Versailles' impact on causing another war is debated, but many at the time saw its potential for future conflict. Economist John Maynard Keynes resigned from the British delegation, claiming the treaty would lead to disaster. A French military leader even predicted it was only a 20-year armistice. The events following World War I demonstrate how peace agreements can lay the groundwork for future wars. Diplomatic setbacks. The League of Nations was established through the Treaty of Versailles and started with 32 member countries, including most of the World War I victors. It later expanded to include Germany and other defeated nations. Despite President Wilson's efforts, the US Senate declined to join. Members pledged to avoid war, with the premise that a threat to one was a threat to all. However, the League struggled to act effectively in practice. The League's mechanism for resolving disputes required unanimous consent, greatly limiting to its effectiveness. For instance, after Japan invaded Manchuria in 1931, the League was unable to intervene due to Japan's veto. Similarly, when Italy invaded Abyssinia in 1935, the League's response was inadequate. Ethiopian Emperor Haile Selassie poignantly questioned what had become of the promises made to me. The League's failure was partly due to overly optimistic view on international cooperation. The 1928 Kilogrand Pact, which aimed to resolve conflicts without violence, was similarly ineffective. Countries like Germany, Italy, and Japan ignored these agreements, and major powers like France and the United Kingdom failed to enforce them. The trauma and the exhaustion from World War I left the League's key powers unwilling and unable to address security threats, leading to more aggression. By the time World War II began, the League was essentially sidelined in global politics. Many believed the absence of US membership was a crucial flaw. Additionally, the departure of Germany, Italy, and Japan by the 1930s further weakened the League's credibility. Despite its ultimate failure to prevent World War II, the League of Nations made significant strides in areas like global health and arms controls. Its principles and some agencies continued through the United Nations. Yet, the challenge of collective security remains as seen during the COVID-19 pandemic, where the UN faced difficulties to disagreements among powerful member nations. The rise of Hitler. Germany's path to World War II started with the final days of the First World War with the signing of the armistice in November 1918. While frontline leaders acknowledged the war was unwinnable, some refused to accept defeat, leading to the spread of a myth. This myth, propagated by conservatives and military figures, falsely claimed that internal unrest and subjugated Germany's war effort. It blamed Jewish people and left-wing activists for the loss, labeling the new Weimar Republic's leaders as November criminals. Economic crisis soon followed. Hyperinflation in the early 1920s caused German currency to plummet in value, rendering savings worthless. By 1923, basic items like bread required wheelbarrows of bills to purchase. After a brief period of recovery, the Great Depression hit, plunging Germany back into financial and political chaos. Unemployment soared, reaching nearly 25% of the workforce by 1932. Amidst this turmoil, support for the Nazi Party surged, growing from 3% of the vote in 1928 to 37% in 1932. The Nazis vowed to overturn the Treaty of Versailles, revive the economy, and restore national pride. They envisioned a larger, racially pure Germany, claiming Germans were superior and deserved more territory in the East or Lebensraum. Once in power, the Nazis targeted those they deemed inferior, including Jews, Slavic, Black, and Roman people. In 1933, President Paul von Hindenburg appointed Adolf Hitler as Chancellor of Germany, believing he could be controlled by the political elite. However, Hitler quickly consolidated power, dismantling Germany's democratic institutions and suspending civil liberties. The nation's brief democratic experiment came to an abrupt end. As the Führer, Hitler reinstated mandatory military service, expanded the armed forces, orchestrated the genocide of millions, and launched invasions across Europe. His rise to absolute power and the subsequent fall of Germany into fascism remain stark reminders of the perils of racism and political extremism. Even 75 years after his death, the impact of Hitler's dictatorship continues to echo through history. Japan's expansion. Japan's 1941 aerial assault on Pearl Harbor in Hawaii drew the United States into another global conflict. While President Franklin D. Roosevelt described the attack as a surprise, it stemmed from Japan's imperial ambitions and long-standing frustrations. For decades, Japan had been discontent with its global standing. In 1919, Japanese representatives sought a racial equality statement in the Treaty of Versailles but were denied. Discriminatory laws in various Western nations also targeted Japanese immigrants. The post-World War I international order seems to favor Western powers' access to resources and wealth, further fueling Japan's resentment. Japan's imperial aspirations had a long history. Taiwan became its first colony in 1895, followed by other territories. In 1931, Japan invaded Manchuria, created a buffer against Soviet communism, and gaining access to crucial natural resources. The invasion escalated into a far-scale war with China by 1937, marking an early chapter of World War II. Japanese forces committed severe atrocities, including massacres and widespread sexual violence, with up to 20 million Chinese casualties between 1937 and 1945. Despite global outrage over events like the rape of Nanjing, international retaliation was sought to materialize. Roosevelt was alarmed by Japan's expansion and the conflict in Europe. He imposed an oil embargo on Japan, which left the Japanese Navy with only 6 months' worth of reserves. Facing this crisis, Japan decided to launch offensives against Western targets, including Pearl Harbor. Following the attack, the United States declared war on Japan on December 8, 1941. In response, Germany and Italy allied with Japan through the 1914 Tripartite Pact, declared war on the United States on December 11, escalating the conflict into a truly global war. US isolationism. In the 1920s and 1930s, the United States largely turned inward. The aftermath of World War I left a somber mood, and the Great Depression devastated many lives. Although the US remained active internationally, especially in Latin America and the Caribbean, it largely stayed out of the conflicts brewing in Europe and Asia. During this period, Congress implemented high protectionist tariffs to protect American business, which strained relationship with trade partners. Additionally, several neutrality acts were passed to avoid foreign entanglements. During the earlier Senate decision to reject US membership in the League of Nations, domestic resistance to President Roosevelt's support for the Allies signaled to Germany and Japan that there were few repercussions for their aggression. By the early 1940s, isolationism had significant backing from America First Committee, a political organization with about 800,000 members, and the support of Charles Lindbergh, the first solo transatlantic pilot. The committee aimed to keep the US out of the war that began in Europe in 1939, but also became a platform for racism and anti-Semitism. The questions of whether the US could have prevented conflict through less isolationist policies is complex. However, the debate over America's role in global politics and whether leaders should prioritize America first continues to this day. Risking peace. In the 1930s, France and the United Kingdom pursued a policy of approximate towards Nazi Germany. This approach meant tolerating Germany's territorial expansion rather than confronting its military force. The hope was that appeasing Hitler's ambition would maintain peace in Europe. The policy hit a critical point in late 1938 when Hitler threatened war unless Sudetenland, a region of Czechoslovakia with a majority German population, was ceded to Germany. Just months earlier, Germany had annexed Austria in the Anschluss. As Hitler sought to unite ethnic Germans under his rule, British Prime Minister Neville Chamberlain believed that granting Hitler's demands for the Sudetenland would satisfy his territorial ambitions. Chamberlain and French leaders signed the Munich Agreements, accepting Hitler's terms in exchange for a promise of no further aggression. Chamberlain famously returned to London declaring peace for our time, but war erupted soon after. In hindsight, approximate has been widely criticized as a failed foreign policy. Today, leaders and historians debate whether more assertive actions could have deterred Hitler's aggression. Yet, at the time, the fear of another devastating war and the domestic pressures influenced by the decisions of British and French leaders. In conclusion, the policy of approximate adopted by France and the United Kingdom in the 1930s remains a continuous chapter in history. Intended to avoid another catastrophic conflict like World War I, approximate ultimately failed to deter Hitler's aggressive ambitions. The Munich Agreements, seen as a symbol of diplomatic failure, demonstrated the peril of attempting to appease totalitarian regimes bent on expansion. Today, the legacy of approximate serves as a stark reminder of the complexities of foreign policy and the dangers of underestimating aggressors. It underscores the importance of vigilance, diplomacy, and decisive action in the face of threats to international peace and security.